So, good evening, and I am delighted to welcome this evening both Jeremy and Griselda Bear. We're principally going to be chatting to Jeremy about his studio, but Griselda's with us as well. So, welcome both of you.
Thank you.
So, as you know, these recordings for ART360 Edition 4 are all about the artist studio. So, I'm sure you're sitting in a studio, but can you tell us, because I can see all your amazing paintings behind you, can you tell us where your first studio was?
Well, my first studio was a kitchen table, probably. I used to do everything at home, but I've inherited a studio from my father-in-law, who was a sculptor called Mark Button. And it had a railway running into it, and with a trolley with the stone on it. And now I've taken that over, and well, we've had it for already 30-something years.
About 30.
Yes.
And that's in your house down in Sussex?
Well, it's not actually in the house, it's a separate building, and it has a sloped, completely north light, so the lighting it is incredible.
So your father-in-law, so Griselda's dad?
Yes.
Ah, so did he have that built? Do you remember him having that studio built, Griselda?
Yes, well, it was built ages and ages ago, but it was built as a sculpture studio, so it just had chippings on the floor and a very basic structure. And since then, we've got a proper floor, we've got heating so that works on paper can be kept safely there, as well as canvases. It's turned really into a Jeremy studio, a painting studio, an artist's painting and drawing studio rather than a sculpture studio, which is much like a workshop.
We've kept his original workbench and his tools, and the trolley that the stone was on for carving is parked outside on the railway.
So you kept the railway?
Oh yes, well, it would be a bit hard to take up.
And that still goes all the way into the studio?
Yes, it still goes right in, and it goes to a telegraph pole with a hoist on it by the road, so the stone could be hoisted off the lorry and delivered straight to the studio.
So you sent me some photographs earlier. Do you have a photograph of that studio?
Yes, I have one of it now, and that's the first picture.
That's okay. So let's screen share so everyone can see what that actual studio looks like. There we go. Oh, there you are. Look.
Yes.
So there you are in the studio. So we can't actually see the railway line, which is a shame because that's fascinating.
No, the bottom of the picture.
Yeah, but you've got a wood burner in there.
Yes, and there's a radiator.
Nice and warm. You and talk to us about what we can see in this picture.
Oh, right. Well, behind the table is an installation I made after visiting Mongolia. We've been to Mongolia twice, and the second time for a whole month. And it suddenly occurred to me that I could make an installation, but instead of having what the prayer wheels would be like outside a temple for people to turn, I thought I would put images from my Mongolian journey on it. So there's what's in the first one, there's what's called an ovo, which is like a mound of stones or a mound of wood with lots of offerings and flags attached to it. And in the foreground are the skulls of racehorses that have been particularly good. And then the next one is camel riding, and the next one is a herder with his cashmere goats, and the next one is modern day transport with the whole family all on a motorbike. And the last one, which you can't really see the details, is horses in the foreground with an ovo which is made of wood with all the offerings on it. And below, the wheels below are actual Sanskrit prayer. And the painting,
we've actually shown that piece, haven't we, at Ballantyne's?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And the painting is, when it was unfinished, is me in Mongolia dressed up as an eagle hunter. And it was absolutely fascinating. And
Did you actually do that? Did you actually have an eagle on your arm?
Yes, I did have an eagle on my arm.
Wow.
We did have its hood on.
Fortunately.
Yes.
Gosh, what an exciting adventure. So when you're out of your studio, collating these images ready to come back to turn them into works of art, however that is, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, how do you go about that? Do you have like a little traveling box that you carry with you of paints or a sketchbook, or
I'd have to admit that I don't take a sketchbook. I mean, a lot of it's from memory, because it's all so vivid, and little notes I make about things, and a journal of where we've been and what we've done.
do you photograph?
I do, and I do shoot little films as well.
Yes, because that takes us back to your previous life, which was in TV. And we were just saying, just prior to coming on air, that the word studio means something quite different to you, doesn't it?
It means a whole lot of sets for some exciting story like Doctor Who or the On Eden Line, and on location too, when you go filming.
The word studio is one of those English words that has multiple meanings.
Yes.
So when you were working on those sets, Doctor Who and Eden Line, etc., did you have your own space within the studio, and did you start making artwork then, or has this been a hobby later?
No, I always did drawings to show directors, and I think one of those is you could see me sitting at my desk in 9B, and
9B. Okay, hang on a sec. Oh wow. Yeah, hang on a sec.
That's 1974.
There you are. So that's in your studio, in the TV studio.
Well, no, that's my desk in the design office with other designers.
Oh, that's amazing. And so the ship in front of you, what's that all about?
Well, that's a clipper ship, and then there's a diagram behind me of how they were constructed, like the Cutty Sark. And actually on the shelf there's a little set model.
I can see, yes.
Yeah. And that I've got in front of me one of the drawings, and that would be 9A, would be a drawing. Okay,
I will pull that up and show people the drawing that you're actually working on. Oh, crikey, yes. Okay, I get to see these before everyone else, of course, because I bring the picture up. Look at that. So that was the drawing you were working on.
Yeah, so that's James on Eden visiting on his way around Africa. I think it was in Zanzibar, supposedly, but obviously it was a set in the studio. And I use, for the Arab figure, I use a drawing I did of myself.
So this is based on you, the guy with the crossed legs.
Yes. and I did lots of research in illustrated London news magazines. So I did develop this style of drawing, which was a bit like the engravings that they had to do for the illustrations before they used photographs.
Yes, you can see the mark making is amazing. The hatching and cross hatching and the lines that you've used.
That's exactly like engravings.
That's fascinating. So you'd never been to Zanzibar, where this is based?
No. I mean, all research had to be done in a library then.
Yes, we didn't have the internet, did we?
No. So 8A is a sketch for a set, and 8B is a photograph of the actual set in the studio for Doctor Who.
Okay, so I'm just going to show that's 8A.
Yes. So I used to do visuals when I was an exhibition designer using coloured pencil. So that was very good and quick to use for TV illustration.
Wow. So I'm going to bring up the other one as well, which was 8B, so
8B.
people can see. So there you are.
Yes, that's the actual set with John Pertwee and Katie Manning. So that was in 1972 when I did that one.
So this was your early style, was very much based on, as you say, that kind of etching and the mark making.
Yes.
And you're using a bit of colour here as well.
Oh, yes.
And had you started painting at this point?
I'd painted some marine subjects, and I had two paintings, one of the Thames barge and another one of a burnt ship in the Royal Society of Marine Artists exhibition, open exhibition.
So was that, oh, here we go. Here it is. Oh, yes. Oh, how beautiful is that? So that was one of your first paintings?
I'd done others, but this was the first major go at actually exhibiting something. And that was the Thames Barge race I went to.
You can see how the influence of your drawing is crossing over into your painting, can't you?
Yes.
But was that done? So the painting of the barge, did you do that from your imagination as well, or did you actually go and see that?
I actually went to see that.
And then painted it.
Yes, and I only had black and white photographs for reference.
So you started off doing all the set designs and in that studio and on your drawing board and everything, and then you had the first paintings exhibited, as you say, at the Royal Society of Marine Artists. Had you moved into your father-in-law's studio by that time?
No, that was long before that. He was still very much alive then.
Still very much alive and using his studio himself.
Yeah.
Did you go and spend time with him in that studio?
We did. In fact, I should have used that photograph, but we've got a set of photographs of different aspects of him working in the studio. And he did books on sculpture. So I took lots of photographs for him of his tools and other things. Then he had a little house which is attached to the studio. Then eventually we built a new house, which was paid for from selling a house in Yorkshire when I had left Yorkshire Television.
Do you still have some of his work around and about?
No, he had a very rich benefactor who...
Here's a piece.
Yeah.
I found the book.
Yes,
oh, wow.
That was called...
The Laughing Mermaid.
The Laughing Bather.
Bather,
yes.
Yeah.
So it's in two different stones, a marble for the base as she comes out of the sea.
It's quite a distinctive style, isn't it, Griselda?
Yeah.
Yes, it is actually. He was fascinated by the sort of detail you can get into and the type of conveying of different sorts of people. I'll see if I can find the one of the black woman. These are all in museums now because of his benefactor. This is one that's
Ken Wood.
Ken Wood. It's Diogenes, the Greek thinker with a bowl.
So he was commissioned by the benefactor to make these for himself or for public?
No, she did a bulk purchase and then distributed amongst the various museums.
Oh wow! Oh, that's stunning, isn't it?
Yes, but because he was working directly in stone, they were very, very slow. So he would do about one a year. He had no power tools at all. So he needed a studio.
Yeah, and all hand tools. So she commissioned him and for a mass amount of work, and then she just decided where it was going to be placed.
Well, she bought them after they'd been made,
yes.
And he had exhibited them in Paris and all sorts of other places. And then there's one which
that's the commission, which is on Oxford University high up. It's the founder of Trinity College. It's Sir Thomas More. So yes, that was a commission. But what he really loved doing was the other works, which are what he actually wants to produce, but very difficult if it's going to take you a year on how you can possibly survive. So, yeah.
Yes, the age-old problem of surviving as an artist as you develop your style and your skill, and you know, thank goodness for patrons.
It's really interesting because there are so many ways, as you found this year, really, that you know, selling art is wonderful, but that isn't by any means the only way artists survive. You should talk a bit about the
yes. Well, Griselda managed to get a grant for our most recent exhibition from the Arts Council, so we could do things like extending it to having different partners for the exhibition, the outreach part of the exhibition, schools and events companies and people who have workshops for a wide variety of people, children and families and people in care homes. And,
as you say, there isn't just one pathway, and that was an exciting pathway that's taken up most of your year, hasn't it? And that's not right for every artist either. The same as making one piece a year isn't right for every artist. I think that's a really important point to make, that it isn't a competition, and you can't, you know, use other artists as pathfinders to see what you can do, but not all these things are right for you. You can try them. You've spent the past year working on, well, I'd say almost the past 3 years, because it started just before the pandemic, didn't it? And then kind of grew. Yes, yeah. So, and that was called Creative Cross Currents.
You've got,
and there's the poster is 2A.
2A. Okay, so let's show the poster. So this is the project that you've been working on pretty much tirelessly for the last 3 years or so, isn't it?
So the interesting thing about that is that for the first year, if it had happened before COVID arrived, we would not have had the grant, because there hadn't been time to get the exhibition together. The 4 artists who all related to each other in as much as they were interested in India and the South Asia, and that influences their work very much. So it was a matter of sort of assembling that and drawing a relationship with Julia Margaret Cameron, who's a Victorian pioneer photographer. And then once that was established, there was possibility of applying for funding. And then putting the partnership together with the 5 other groups who were going to take it out beyond the gallery. And the thing about the Arts Council grant is it's not only enables you to work with many other people, but it also, they insist that the artists are correctly paid for their participation. So you get paid a fee for lending your work, in effect, to the museum to show.
And there was money for me to make a film of the exhibition as well.
I see that there were other funders, not just the Arts Council.
Yes, there's White Link, which is the ferry company, and the Momentous, who provided the transport for us, which was incredible, which we didn't have to pay for.
Nor the insurance in transit. I mean, that was a huge amount because of it. The cost of such a thing nowadays, transport and insurance in transit.
And are they linked to Arts Council, or are they somebody that you found yourself?
Well, they're somebody I've known in different incarnations of that company for about 30 years. When I was working as a curator for the Canadian government, all the exhibitions had to come from Canada, and that was obviously a big deal. And I managed to use a sponsor who transported the Canadian government employees' belongings, and they were very happy. They had an art arm, and it's led on from that extraordinarily. They've sponsored things when I was at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. They've sponsored things all through, and I didn't dare to think they would do this, but they were, delighted, and it was quite a small thing for them to do, but they felt involved in something because it had such a big impact throughout the whole of that bit of the country. They were interested in being involved.
So the links between the artists were my paintings that I'd done as a result of going to India several times, and particularly Calcutta, And Julia Margaret Cameron was brought up in Calcutta, and she came to France when she was 3 because her grandmother, her mother was French, and so she went to stay with her grandmother, and she did visit England as well. And she went back and got married in Calcutta to someone high up in the Raj government, and they eventually came to England, and her children, when she was about 48, gave her a camera, and it's all started with her from there. And she photographed all sorts of influential people like Tennyson and Darwin, and she had her own studio in the V&A Museum to photograph people. And then, because she knew Tennyson, who had a big estate on the Isle of Wight, she found this house which she named Dimbala Lodge, and the name came from coffee plantations the family had in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. And then she eventually went, towards the end of her life, she went back to Ceylon, and she died on the coffee estates there. And Marion North, who has a
I was just about to say, that's the amazing link, isn't it? Because you've got that gallery that was developed and paid for by a woman in that time, and then you've got the Marianne North Gallery in Kew, which is a very similar situation.
Yes, and there are actually photographs that Julia Margaret Cameron took of Marianne North painting on her veranda in Ceylon.
Oh, I think there's another project here, Griselda.
I think there is. Yes.
I think there's another project. We're going to do a visit. You're very kindly organising a visit for Pure members to the Marianne North Gallery in, I think it's in April, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that. And we also have a connection in Hastings with Marianne North as well. And there was a Marianne North project done in conjunction with Hastings Museum. And that was got to have been like 2017, 2018, I should think now. But isn't it fascinating, these pioneers really doing something quite extraordinary, and then your dad makes this work, and then there's a benefactor, a female benefactor who buys it and gifts it to museums in the, I'm presuming this is pre-World War II.
No, it's all
1960s.
Oh, that's the 1960s.
Yeah.
There's one in the British Museum, there's one in Doncaster, one in Brighton. They're all over the place, quite eccentrically. But this is the thing that, art happens in so many different ways. That's so fascinating curatorially. And to find these links, the other 2 artists in the exhibition both live here, do lots of film work. One was a stills photographer in the film industry in the 50s.
That's Duncan Pereira, who came from Sri Lanka originally.
And so there are all these interweavings with different experiences and cultures. And this has been going on in art history forever, as we know. And we might,
and Sunara, it has the Bangladeshi heritage, and she does performances and makes films, and she's followed in the footsteps of Julia Margaret Cameron in Calcutta and Sri Lanka.
So it just goes to show you've just got to keep going, haven't you? And you'll find your pathway, and you'll find those really important connections, and there's nothing to stop you.
No,
you're never too old, as the camera at 48. Money, making money, that pathway will emerge as you're in alignment with yourself. Amazing. And you were defeated with this project really at the beginning of the pandemic when it was all closed down, but look how it rose from the ashes into something incredible that no one could have ever imagined.
So we've got some more photographs.
Oh yes, go on then, tell me.
There's from 2B onwards numerically, and through to...
Oh yes, so I see 2B is all the people.
Through to 7B.
Right, so let's do 2. Okay, so we'll do 2B first. Talk to me about these. So who are these people? So you've got the names down the bottom, but talk to me about them.
Well, Jane Richter has done lots of research in India, and she made a 2-hour film about her travels there and Julia Margaret Cameron. So she showed the film at the Private View, and now she's in India, showing it in India.
Yeah, so
And next to her is Colin Ford, who was the original president of the Dimbala Trust and is a famous museum person. And he set up the Film and Media Museum in Bradford. And while I was working at Yorkshire Television, and I did some of the interiors for the museum, and then he went on to the Welsh Museum, and he's an authority on Julia Margaret Cameron and has published a huge book on her in the past. And next to him is Sunara Begum, who makes films, and she did a performance at the Private View, and she does prints as well, which were in the exhibition. And when the way it was hung was to mix all the artists' work together. There weren't separate spaces for each artist.
I can see behind you've got your two either side and then other artists in the middle there.
Yes. And Julian Bell is the present president of the Dimbala Trust, and he's a writer and painter
he's related, actually. He is related. He's one of the Bell family, related to Julia Margaret Cameron. Fascinatingly, yes. Virginia Woolf was related to Julia Margaret Cameron. Fascinating. Jaspreet came to represent the Indian High Commission with his whole lovely family. He's one of the. He's not the High Commissioner, but sort of next in command. Yeah, but I mean, it was very interesting because we certainly had the exhibition, as the other slides show, inspiring children.
Yes,
and
if you move on to 3A now and 3B.
Here you are, 3A, this is the children.
Yes, doing a workshop, which I filmed so I could incorporate it to the film of the exhibition. And then there's another one, 3B, which is talking about the installation I made, especially for the exhibition.
It was like a festival little prayer corner that they would have had in Julia Margaret's time within the house. They celebrated what's now a great big outdoor festival every autumn. They only celebrated it within the house.
But the big painting on the installation is inside what's called a puja pandal, where they make huge temporary buildings in all sorts of styles, and inside is a representation, usually in huge, over life-size figures, of Durga and her sort of children gods like Saraswati and Lakshmi and Ganesh, the one who has an elephant's head. But this one actually had a huge painting instead of the figures. So it was all little and
what are all the things down the bottom? It's amazing, like a little owl and such like.
Props from India, little drums. The drums they're modelled on are much bigger, and all sorts of other things like offerings and
things we collected when we were in India, basically craft objects for the children to handle and feel. They were not treated like precious artworks. They were to be handled and enjoyed by the children.
Yes, you've spent quite a lot of time in India, haven't you?
Oh yes, because our daughter Laura did her, as an anthropologist, we did her field work there.
If you look at 5A, you can see what the children made.
No, hold on, yes.
Oh yes.
This is 4A, so this is them sitting, and this demonstrates, like you were saying, that the work is interspersed, so it's not all just hung in batches of one artist, which is fascinating. Who curated? Was it you curated it, Griselda?
Yeah, it was that was totally my project from the beginning, really, having 5 artists that went. The exhibition started at a Private View in London, where we met the director of this place and realized that Jeremy had such a connection with Calcutta and Julia Margaret had. And so that's really how it began. And I was obviously on the spot and the curator who was nearest to hand.
Yeah. Curator at large.
So there's four, it goes on with 4B and then 5A.
Yeah, so there's 4B. There's the lady again.
Yes, that's Jane demonstrating, I mean, giving the workshop to the children.
Mm.
The 5A is really interesting because it's what the children did, having seen the installation and observed the film in the exhibition and the paintings. They then produced in school this amazing prop. Look at that.
That's incredible.
Isn't it amazing?
So did they made that completely independently, away from...
Completely. Yes. They came and visited the exhibition and then went off to their school and made that, so that and made drums as well, yes. Their own drums. So if you look at the next one, and they learned to dance. There was a dance choreographed by a company, new carnival company, who do carnival with the public and in schools all over the country. And they choreographed a dance for them and got them to make drums. And they danced in front of Doga, that's the prop. I mean, it really was quite a revelation, I must say, for Jeremy to see his paintings actually having so many, leading out into so many other directions, and for so many people to be looking at them and thinking about what they could do as a result of that. And there was the song, the Harmony Junction song, at the Southampton Mailer.
That's 7B.
7B. One of the main themes was the fusion of East and West art. And something called Music Hub and Art Asia in Isle of Wight and in Southampton musicians worked together to write a song which would encapsulate the art in the exhibition. Wrote this wonderful song, which then went out on a training video to every school in the Isle of Wight for them to learn. And then a choir came to the Southampton Mailer, which has, they say, 27,000 visitors. And it was the first item on the main stage. So it was sort of amusing.
This really is you taking your studio out on the road, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
And then they had a stall in a tent as well in 7A, you'll see, where people could participate in making little prints and other things.
Yes.
I think this is a good example of what COVID did achieve positively for us, that there was a lot of time and for a lot of people when they could develop things much more thoroughly than is normally possible. I've never seen an exhibition, not an exhibition on this scale, that has had so many other things that have developed out of it. One finally, I know we've seen lots of these. If you look at 6A, you'll see some puppets.
Right, sorry, say the number again.
6A.
6A. Oh, yes, I see, puppets.
There were about 40 or 50 of these puppets made by children out of old materials. I mean, aren't they beautiful? They're just so
amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing. So, I mean, that's a really interesting angle to go on, is that about time. And how you afford yourself the time to develop, because these, as we said, this isn't for everyone, because this takes a lot of time to develop a project of this nature. And you had the time over COVID, but that's not general life, is it? And we were just saying, how quickly this year's gone and how speedily it's passed. How are you thinking about the future and developing projects going forward now?
We actually have
we've got a new exhibition next year at the Gunnersbury Museum in West London, which is only a short walk from us really here.
And is that all of this work again, or is it something completely new?
What it is?
Oh, are you prepared to reveal, or are you gonna keep that all to
It's all
yourself?
about my design work for the BBC.
Oh, amazing.
And it's going to be on from August 2023 until January 2024.
We'll definitely all have to come and have a look at that,
Yeah.
won't we?
And
Yeah. So is
and-
that's another funded project, is it? Have you had funding for
yes,
that?
the museum are funding
The
that.
museum, Gunnersbury Museum have become a national portfolio organisation. You know, the Arts Council has
Yes.
particularly of museums like that, and they've just received their first national portfolio status. So they have a proper budget for their exhibitions, and we're working with the senior curator, and they're basically doing. I haven't got to do it. We've just had the pleasure of working with them, and particularly Jeremy, I think, looking back at a very creative time.
Yes, I mean,
great fun.
I'd say about being at the BBC, I was there from 1966 to 1979. It was like being at some supercharged university, because everything, it couldn't be learned in any other way than how the BBC was then. And all the designers were incredibly competitive, and the atmosphere was marvelous.
How did it work then? Did you get given a concept and then you all had to go at it and someone's would get chosen?
Oh no, not bidding.
It sounds.
No, I mean the design manager and the head of the design department picked up on which designer would suit which particular sort of program, and you'd be just allocated it.
Phew.
So whatever, it could be Doctor Who, it could be. I mean, I did lots of the On Eden line about a shipping family in the 19th century, and plays for today, and even play school as well. I mean, you just went from one thing to the other.
Yeah. And do you think that's influenced you, that still influences you today? I know you love boats.
Oh yes, yes. I love that, but I love those, yes. And I've done a lot of sailing in different parts of the world as well.
So that's amazing. You're going to have that retrospective of your work, which is absolutely right and about time, isn't it? That should happen. What
Yes.
are you actually working on with your own practice now today, and which studio are you spending most time in?
Well,
because I know you're in your London studio.
yes.
We're speaking to you from your London studio.
Yes, I mean, I've been working on it, or I would take it down to the Sussex studio, but it's a large painting of a Japanese temple grove, which is tightly surrounded by huge conifers. And then there's an avenue of stone and bronze temple lanterns going towards a small bit of the temple buildings. And right in the foreground is a seated fox. And foxes in Japan are considered to be a sort of god and shapeshifters and mysterious characters that can play tricks on people. So
this sounds amazing. And this is all from your imagination, is it?
Yes.
I can't wait to see that. That sounds amazing. I love the symbolism as well. You do use a lot of symbolism, don't you, in your painting now? So this is moving with you between both studios.
Yes.
It goes on the road. It's going on the road before it's finished.
Yeah.
So
going back to Gunnersbury, I've recently done a panel discussion with cast members of Doctor Who in the past, and the granddaughter of the original Doctor Who, who's actually an agent for film editors and actors. And so that was in public, which I've not done before. And we each had a period to talk about our work. And I made a little 3-minute film of all the sketches I did for Doctor Who. And I animated a bit of it as well.
Yeah, you're loving the filmmaking, aren't you? Is that something that you're spending more time doing?
Yes, I mean, it always comes up because I made a film which was part of the Creative Cross Currents exhibition, which was about the Durga Puja, the last 5 days of the festival, which takes place in October, which is over 10 days, and it's a bit like Christmas for Indians.
And Griselda, what are you up to?
I am enjoying, if you want to know what my studio is, it's my favorite one is actually in London, where I sit at a desk and look out onto a pretend Japanese garden. It is the most, I like calm. I like when I'm thinking up ideas and being creative. I like to have something very calm and quite full of emotion, but yeah, so that I feel in a sort of separate world. And I find that when I have ideas, what I'm doing is thinking about places where we might have a different version of creative cross currents. And it won't be for quite a few years, because obviously museums and places plan 3 years ahead, which is fine in this business, but it means nothing happens very fast. Yeah, so
you're pondering the future for that.
I am indeed.
And what about Farley? Have you doing anything with Farley?
Yes, we've got a wonderful new volunteer who's actually going to enable us to do much more on the art awards. Art awards are where we invite every school in East Sussex to submit their A-level GCSE students for an exhibition that we then make up out of the best of those. And we also do some mentoring and provide bursaries for those who have good ideas about what they would spend a few £100 on to advance their very early careers in the arts. So yes, I'm very busy on that at the moment. And
we had a wonderful time, didn't we, going to the Surrealist picnic
at
Farley Farmhouse. That was just the best time, I have to say.
Yeah, hopefully many more of us will go next year. That'll be great.
I think anyone who's watching, we commend you to the Surrealist picnic at Farley Farmhouse. It was the best fun I've had in a long time.
Yeah.
It was really great. Thank you so much, both of you, for being so generous and sharing your thoughts and all about your studios and what you've been up to and all those lovely images as well. It's been great. I don't know whether Carol or Vincent, if you have any questions, if you do pop them in the chat bar at the side. But I think I have to be honest with you, two of you, you're very thorough in answering all the questions. And I really am looking forward to coming up to Kew and going to the Marianne North gallery. I know your flat in London overlooks Kew, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And the river and the paintings will be here to see in person.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, that would be lovely, because those paintings behind you are really evocative. And I particularly like the guy pulling the cart on the one behind Griselda. I like his trousers. Well, it's not really trousers, it's kind of like the bottom half of his outfit. I love the way you do material. You do material really, really well. And it always looks, it's incredibly evocative. Where can we see your work at the moment, Carol says? Where can they actually see it apart from in your studio?
On my website.
Oh, on your website. So what is your website address?
Jeremy Bear, www.jeremybear.co.uk.
There you are, people. You heard it here first. I would try and get it up, but my screen is taken up with a lot of images currently. So I'm just going to, there's a lot of images there. So, so www.jeremybear.com. It's a straightforward. .co.uk. Sorry, not .com. .co.uk. So that's where you can see. What was your father's name, Griselda?
It was Mark Batten, Batten, and he did things like, well, he won the big prize at the Paris, like the Royal Academy in Paris. I remember one year, great excitement going over there to get the gold prize. And he was president of the Royal Society of British Sculptors. Yeah, so he had all sorts of roles in his in his lifetime, lived to a ripe old age. But as I say, there's not a huge amount of work because he worked so slowly.
He did start as a painter.
Yes, he did.
And we have two, in our house in Sussex, we have two big drawings he did in 1932 in black and white.
Very, very detailed, very, very beautiful, fine details. Vincent has seen them.
Yes.
Yeah, and you may have seen them. Yes.
I think I have seen them, yes. And how is your yurt? Before we finish, how's the yurt?
Lovely. It's a bit given a rest in winter.
Yes.
We're giving it a rest until the spring.
Do you dismantle it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, that would be ideal, but we don't.
No. In the spring, we're going to have a day when Ukrainian friends who are here from, obviously, I don't want to call them refugees, that seems very unfortunate, but there are quite a few Ukrainian artists in Sussex, and we're going to have a session at Christian's River for them, their children to draw, and a studio visit and a walk in the woods. So
lovely.
If you any Ukrainians or
there's a as you say, there's a large contingent of Ukrainians in Sussex right now, just temporarily staying here while things are not so pleasant in their homeland.
Yes,
and I'm sure they will return home as soon as they can. And I know most of the ones I've spoken to are very keen to go home to to Ukraine, but not at the moment while with the current situation. So that's lovely, and I look forward to hearing more. I'd look forward to hearing more about that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And it was really fascinating to hear about your dad, Griselda.
It's quite an unusual artist.
Yeah, I would definitely look him up now and do more research into him. He sounds fascinating. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you both very much for sharing.
Thank you to you.
Yes, yeah.